So when we got back home, I snuck away. I had a couple of £100, which was a bit of money at the time, and I went straight off back to Puerto Solier, and where I'd met this lady, an English lady who owned a hotel there called the Costa Brava. Her name was Noreen Harbord. She'd been a great socialite. In fact, she'd done a little bit of prison time in England for operating an illegal smuggling Swiss watches in a bogus racing car team. Can you imagine, around Europe? This was early days. Anyway, she saw me coming and thought, yes, Robert, you're welcome. You can stay here and you can teach sailing. I know you're a good sailor, so I taught sailing off the beach there. But of course, she was. Her name was Bloody Mary because she used to get absolutely paralytic on Bloody Marys, and it was quite a social embarrassment to all her guests, and mainly British. But I acted as host in the hotel. That was really my introduction to travel. Because then someone came along and said, would I like to become a rep in Parma? So I said yes. I'd already become a little bored with having to be her toy boy, and took off for Parma on my scooter and became a rep for a Welsh company called Hormont. Then had quite an extensive operation looking after various hotels there. And I did that for about the rest of the season. And then when I stashed a bit of money away, it was quite good. I went off to the south of France, bumped into a bunch of my friends, and managed to spend it all in a few weeks. Wound up back in London, where my father seemed to have always a permanent suite in the Piccadilly Hotel. Hi, Dad. What are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm broke. And he said, well, you better find a job, hadn't you? So I walked off that day, and I remember it was a Friday afternoon. I walked up New Bond Street and saw a company called Millbank Travel, and I walked in there. I said, "Do you like a rep? You're looking for a rep at all?" And they said, "Yes, fill out the forms." So I filled out all the forms, went upstairs, met this very nice lady, and she said, "Parlez-vous français, monsieur Cowland?" I said, "Oui." And she said, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" So I said, "Ja." I didn't speak any German, but I had spent a bit of time in Austria at a furniture factory gluing door frames together, learned a few words anyway, travelling around Europe. And she said, well, here's a file. We're looking for somebody to conduct this tour. Go across the road to the Four Seasons and have a cup of coffee. If you can't handle it, then bring it back to us. So this was about 2:00 in the afternoon. And by the time I'd looked at everything, already it was a Saturday, that's right. And the tour was starting on the Sunday at Liverpool Street Station. I said, and by the time I looked through it all, it was too late. They'd already closed. So the next day I went back to the Piccadilly Hotel and said to Father, I said, got a job. Good Lord, he said, well, enough clothes? Yeah, I said, well, sort of, And a case that I brought back with me. So off I went on tour the next day. I met about 45 Americans, and we took the train to Harwich, and then an overnight boat to the Hook of Holland, and I picked up a bus the other side, Dutch driver who hardly ever been out of Holland, and must have been the only Dutchman you could possibly meet who didn't speak any English. And off we went to Rotterdam to try to find this restaurant where we had an included lunch. And this tour, that was 36-day tour of Europe, of where I'd been hardly anywhere. I spoke reasonable Spanish. I could understand Italian a little bit from that, and I spoke quite good French, and that was it. But I think my accent and my good manners and good upbringing stood me in good stead with these Americans, and they forgave me. But I met, there were two very attractive school teachers of about 30, 35 years old. They took me under their wing and said, well, I think we probably know more about this tour than you do. And so we just swatted up at night, and then I would take the microphone. I remember the first stop in Luxembourg after we got through, went to Brussels actually, and then from Brussels, Luxembourg. And at lunchtime I heard in the open sort of toilet area, as we'd had lunch, and I heard this lady say, I hear that goddamn Courier say, ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention please one more time? I'll throttle him. So I thought, God, I was so polite with a microphone, I would announce myself every time. No experience. Some of you might remember they made a movie in 1969 with I'm trying to think who played Lovejoy. What was the name of the actor who played Lovejoy? Ian McShane. He played the Courier, as we were called in those days. And it was quite a funny movie. I watched it again recently. It was about a tour around Europe with a bunch of Americans. Well, my tour would have made him much, much, much funnier and a better. I could write a book about that particular tour. But anyway, I enjoyed that experience, and it was 36 days. Somehow I managed to make some money. Came back and said to the company, can I do that again? They said, go away and study a little bit. People said, you were very nice but inexperienced. So I went away and went on the Norfolk Broads and rented a boat and went sailing for a couple of weeks and studied like anyway. So, and off I went back to do my next tour. Fortunately, I had a companion parallel with me, a very illustrious person. He was General Clements Rudnitsky, who had been who'd been the three-star general under General Anders, the Polish. He was the last actual officer to lead a charge on horseback and cavalry. He was a great war hero mentioned by Winston Churchill on several occasions, and because he was a linguist, these sort of people fell into this job of couriering or guiding tours around Europe. So he became my mentor. We were parallel, and what an honour it was. I mean, an incredible man, erect, about 6'2". He'd lost an arm, and he was, of course, the one who led the successful attack on the Battle of Monte Cassino in Italy between Rome and Naples. He lost the use of an arm and he lost an eye, so he had this piercing blue eye and he had a black patch. But he was a very good-looking man and incredibly interesting. And I learnt so much in 6 weeks from him. And he taught exactly what to do. Don't carry books about the information all the time. He said, learn it. And when you come across a place, you pass by it. It might be just a sign. It will trigger your memory. And so that was the beginning of what for me was a bit more than 50 years of guiding tours for Americans, Canadians, all English-speaking people, not English, had nothing to do with this country. I didn't live here, so I didn't have to pay tax here either. So I lived somewhere in the middle of the ocean, and so had a very lucrative career and a very interesting career. Thoroughly enjoyable. I mean, so many stories and things that happen in a career in that particular time. You get everything happening. They die on the bus. All kinds of amazing stories, and a lifetime of memories. And I felt that I'd fulfilled a really interesting career, and that I'd given a lot of people pleasure, and many people I'm still in touch with after all these years. My life as a courier, I remember telling my father when I got to be there, I said, that's what I'm doing now, Dad, I'm a courier. Courier? I said, no, not a courier, I don't make courier. Courier. And he said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, actually it's wrong because it means a messenger. I said, there's the only thing, I don't message, the only message I give is out as information where we're going and so on. But so it's a kind of, later became an outdated term. You know, we later became known in the profession tour managers, then tour directors, and now to be politically correct, I think my colleagues they can't talk about their passengers, they have to talk about guests. It's all changed. No, and it's all changed. And but my gosh, the things that happened. I think probably in my early days, we just left Munich. And after lunch, we were headed to Salzburg. It's down the Autobahn. And I was talking about Hitler's Eagle's Nest at the time, which is off to the right, and Bad Reichenhall and up in the mountains there. And we were getting close to the border, and I was just about to tell people, get ready to have your passports out and so on. And there was a lady, and I never forget her name, Liz, she was Australian, and she tapped me on the shoulder. She was in the 2 seats behind. She was travelling with an Australian companion who was actually like a really good friend, but not her husband or anything, where they were couple, I don't know. And she tapped me on the shoulder, and I sort of went back, and I said, "Yes, what is it?" She said, "I don't want to alarm you, Robert," but she said, "But James Jimmy has actually just passed away. I'm here with the microphone." Really? Oh, yes. So I switched the microphone off, and I looked round, and I see, and his eyes were closed. She closed his eyes. And I said to her, "Well, we're coming to the border," and I had to really think very quickly about what to do about it, because I thought, if we arrive at the border and we have a dead body on board, they're going to impound the coach. I think, we might not be. We've got to get, and this is sort of 4:30 in the afternoon. We've got to get to the hotel and get into the hotel. So I said, "Well, can you just hold it when the Germans come on, or the Austrians? In fact, we come to the German border, then we advance after done some paperwork, and we advance to the Austrian side, and they'll come on and check passports. Just tell him he's asleep." So anyway, as soon as we came to the German border, I had to get out with my driver. We had to go and pay the tax and so on. I thought, I can't tell him, and so we came back, and I said, move to the Austrian side, and then I had to be there and standing as the customs and passport officer came on, and then I'm standing in the sort of well, looking at him and wondering if he's going to go grey or pink, or what's going to happen. I'm thinking, is he going to vomit? And I'm terrified. Well, terrified. And the customs went through the bus. It seemed like an eternity, checking all the passports, and came. And then we got the permission to move off. And then from the border, actually, it's about 20 minutes to the hotel. You can see Salzburg. So I got to the hotel. I said to everybody, "Come on in." And I said to her, "Liz, just hang behind with Jimmy." And so we went in. I got everybody checked in. And then I said, "You just wait in the bus." So then my driver was getting all the luggage out, and got the luggage out. And I said to him, "Jean," I said, "I need your hand." I said, "We've got to get Jimmy out and up to the room." And I'd meanwhile told the hotel, I said, "I've got a very sick passenger, and maybe I could have the porters help me as well, take this passenger up to the room because he's not well. Could you call a doctor?" So they did. Anyway, we had to maneuver him out of the bus through the lobby, and a few of the clients were still in the lobby, and of course they said, "Oh, Jimmy doesn't look too well, does he?" So anyway, we managed to get him up to the room and lay him out, and the doctor arrived, and he did actually speak some English, and I spoke German at that stage, and he said to me, "Herr Reiseleiter," which means Mr. Tolle, "Darf ich mit Ihnen sprechen? Or can I talk to you outside of the..." And he said, "This gentleman has passed away." I had to, "Really?" And I said, "My God, I have to break the news to his partner there." And he said, "Yes." He said, "But I'm a little disturbed. How long you've just arrived here?" But he's been dead for at least 2 hours. He told me so. I said to Liz, and I had to go and say to her, "Listen, will you look surprised when I tell you that he's dead?" And so she overreacted, and immediately, it was a delayed reaction, burst into tears and wound up in a complete heap of useless person on the bed, and it was all very dramatic. And so that was, and somehow one of the porters kind of knew something was wrong, and the word spread around downstairs that we'd imported this sort of dead body from the bus into the but we left him behind, and the tour next morning, we did our sightseeing tour, and we left for Vienna. She stayed behind, and she had him cremated, and she caught up with us in Rome about 5 or 6 days later. Amazing. So that was the only one that ever died on the bus. But I had one die also. I found him dead in his room as a single man, an American. That's kind of fraught. I mean, these things happen in that business. Getting away from the death scenario, in Vienna, I was down in the lobby of the hotel, the Park Hotel Schönbrunn, lovely old classic hotel. the Emperor's Guest House, in fact, chandeliers, the whole bit. I was getting ready we were all meeting downstairs to go out for an excursion of the evening. I was taking them for a drink and then to a Vienna waltz concert and Hungarian dinner and all. And we had this single New Zealand girl on her own. She was a woman. She was probably about 35, 40 at the time, I think she was. Always seemed a little offbeat and a little crazy. She'd disappear off on her own. Very often would come late, and but she was very attractive and had a wonderful sort of body, and she wore some quite sort of risque clothes. Anyway, it turned out we were all standing down in the lobby, and there's the great staircase to the old part of the hotel. All of a sudden, and there were lots of other people down there, other groups waiting to get ready to go out. All of a sudden, you hear this sort of gurgling come screaming, and everyone looked round, and down she came in a bra only and naked, the rest of her. She came trotting down the stairs, waving her arm, "Hello everybody, hello everybody, hello everybody." And it took a little while for me to sink in who it was. You know, you don't think, who is this immediately? Oh my God. And so the whole reception staff there, so I just, naturally, she got to this, I ran up to her and just grabbed her to kind of cover her modesty somewhat, and dragged her to the side to the left there where the telephone booths were, for you, actually sort of like booth, and put her in a booth there. And I think this is probably the most bizarre thing that ever happened, and the hotel for years still talked about this crazy client that I had who came running down the great staircase when you couldn't have had more people in there, I mean totally naked. The sad thing was that we got her upstairs, and I had to leave her there. I had to go out, and she seemed okay. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry, she didn't quite know what she'd done." And I thought, what do you do about this? Do you get a doctor in immediately? So I said to the reception, I said, get a doctor and have a doctor and come and examine her. I had to leave with the people. We went out for the evening, but turned out she's fine, and after that she was perfectly all right. We never had a problem. No one ever mentioned it, whether she quite what had happened, an aberration, a moment or something. She'd said that she'd had a boyfriend back home and that she'd had a row with him. That was the only indication that we had there was something wrong. I mean, telephone calls in those days to New Zealand were strange. So I'd wonder whether it was a lie or not. But that was certainly I've never heard any of my colleagues having had a problem like that. But of course, you know, touring in those days, I mean, there were so many things that could go wrong. You know, we would get stuck in traffic problems, and I remember once being stuck on the Leubel Pass going into Yugoslavia before it became Slovenia, and we'd had a kind of landslide there. It's a very narrow pass, you have to go up and go down, and we had to spend 6 hours there in the bus before we could actually kind of repair the road enough for us to get through. All kinds of things like that, you know. But I was lucky that in all the years and all the, I don't know, millions of kilometers that I did, never had an accident in the bus, never had a real drama or anything like that. It was quite remarkable, really. And the so many people through my hands over those years, you know, that having great memories and great times. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, that was. It's just not the same anymore. My colleagues now tell me. Spoke to one the other day that now they have what they call a well-being director on the bus with them. So the well-being director has to go around and spray all the seats and clean all the time, and hold the hands of all the people a little bit worried about whether they're going to pick it up or not, and check the systems. And they really, it's not easy. You can only have one captain on the ship, and you know these are not fun days anymore. Touring in Europe will never be the same. They try to keep people separate in seatings, and with this COVID nonsense, you know, everything's changed, hasn't it? It's really not. I'm so glad now. I had the very best years in my profession and enjoyed them, and I got out at the right time. That is absolute for sure. Although I retired from sort of coach touring some years ago, I now am working for a British company and cruise directing river cruise ships in Europe. So I still get to do my lecturing. I talk about medieval warfare, all kinds of lectures, whatever they want. And up and down the rivers of the Rhine, from Amsterdam all the way to the Black Sea, the Rhone, the Seine, and enjoy it. The last 2 years, of course, everything's been cancelled, but hopefully now I already have my schedule for this next year coming up. So that career suited me very well, and it's probably the reason why I never ever got married. I never had any against marriage, but early on in my career, I used to see my colleagues, and when we would reassemble in March and start crisscrossing and meeting each other in various hotels around Europe, they say, "Oh, Robert, I got married and I have a baby now. You don't know what you're missing. You need to set up a home life and have some foundation in your life." And I thought, well, 6 months of working 24/7, really hard. I mean, it is day and night, that job. I was little time, maybe sometimes a day, 2 days between tours. That might not be back in England. It could be turning around in Rome or anywhere in Europe. And I thought, well, I don't think whether this is, how can you spend 6 months with a wife and children and then be 6 months away? I don't think that this profession is particularly conducive to this way of life.